Hello to all dear students. In this video, we will be discussing about error type 1 and type 2. See this statistics, it is not a foolproof science. It is a game of probability and we can never know for certain whether our statistical conclusions are correct or incorrect. And whenever there is uncertainty, there is the possibility of making an error. And in context of testing this hypothesis, there are basically two types of error. Okay, as you can see in the heading itself, type 1 error and type 2 error. See, basically error, in general it means to commit a mistake. And here in this context, we are making a mistake in accepting or rejecting the null hypothesis, which could be of two types. Okay, so I'll be giving an example and meanwhile I'll make you understand what exactly is type 1 error and type 2 error. Okay, so moving towards the example. Suppose this is a couple, a husband and a wife. They went to the hospital for some medical checkup and they got to know that they are going to have a baby soon. Okay, so the null hypothesis is the couple is going to have a baby very soon. Okay, so whatever doctor says will be our null hypothesis. Okay, just keep this in mind. Whatever doctor says will be our null hypothesis. Okay, and the null hypothesis, it can be true or it can be false also in reality. Okay, null hypothesis is just a probability. It can be true or it can be false, and we have the power to either reject the null hypothesis or accept, or you can say not to reject the null hypothesis, which can be done on the basis of research or survey or some kind of investigation. Now, suppose the doctor says to the wife that you are pregnant. This is 100% true statement, isn't it? This null hypothesis is 100% true. But we have rejected this. So that means we have committed a mistake. Means it is an error. So when the null hypothesis is true, but we reject it, this is known as type 1 error. Okay, why we reject it? Maybe we have done some kind of test, urine test or blood test we have done, and we got a false blood test or urine test. Okay, because of which we have rejected the null hypothesis that the lady is pregnant. Okay, so the null hypothesis was true, but we have rejected the null hypothesis. So this is an error known as type 1 error. Next, suppose the doctor says to the husband, you are pregnant. Well, that's false, obviously, and we rejected this null hypothesis. So this is a correct decision, right? See, here in this case, whatever doctor says will be our null hypothesis, and here the null hypothesis was the man is pregnant, and we know it cannot happen. It is a false null hypothesis, and our decision was we rejected it. So in total, our decision was 100% correct. Next situation, suppose the doctor says to the husband that you are not pregnant. So that's a true statement, isn't it? How can be a man pregnant? And the null hypothesis that the man is not pregnant, we have not rejected this. Not rejected means we have accepted the thing. So this is a correct decision. Okay, the man, he cannot be pregnant. The statement is true and we have not rejected this true statement. So we have taken a correct decision. Lastly, suppose the doctor says to the wife, you are not pregnant. This time this is a false statement. This null hypothesis is false because at the start of the example only we got to know that the couple is going to have a baby, and now the null hypothesis is suggesting that the wife is not pregnant. Well, in reality that is a false null hypothesis, but after research what we did not rejected this false null hypothesis. Okay, need not rejected means we have accepted this false null hypothesis. So this means again we have committed a error, and this time this error is known as type 2 error. Okay. So in in this hypothesis testing, we have got two types of error, as you can see, type 1 error and type 2 error. Type 1 error means here we are rejecting a true null hypothesis, whereas in type 2 error we are accepting the false null hypothesis. Okay, as you can see here in type 1 error, okay, as you can see here in type 1 error, here in actual reality the lady is pregnant, and that was our null hypothesis as well, that the doctor is saying that the wife is pregnant. So this null hypothesis was true, but what we are doing, we are rejecting this null hypothesis. So such kind of error is known as type 1 error, whereas type 2 error means here the null hypothesis is false. The null hypothesis is false. The doctor is saying to the lady that she is not pregnant. This is a false null hypothesis. And what we are doing? We are not rejecting the false null hypothesis. We are accepting it. Okay, we are accepting this false null hypothesis. So again, this is a kind of error. So accepting a false null hypothesis, this kind of error is known as type 2 error. Okay. Next, little bit more we'll try to study about type 1 error. So in general, type 1 error you got to know. Type 1 error means here the null hypothesis will be true, but we are rejecting the true null hypothesis. Such kind of error is known as type 1 error. A type 1 error, also known as error of the first kind, occurs when the null hypothesis is true but is rejected. Okay, as you can see, you have seen this example. The lady is pregnant. This null hypothesis is true, but we are rejecting it. So such kind of error is known as type 1 error. A type 1 error may be compared with so-called false positive. A type 1 error occurs when we believe in falsehood. Type 1 error is denoted by the Greek letter alpha. And with alpha, what came in your mind? Yes, that is the level of significance. Okay. If type 1 error is fixed at 5%, it means that there are about 5 chances out of 100 that we reject the null hypothesis when the null hypothesis is true. So we have got very minimum chances of committing type 1 error. Next we'll check out the type 2 error. Type 2 error means here the null hypothesis will be false. Okay, this statement that you can see, you are not pregnant, this thing is a false statement, but we are not rejecting, means we are accepting a false, a wrong null hypothesis. A type 2 error, also known as error of the second kind, occurs when the null hypothesis is false, but erroneously we fail to reject it. Okay, as you can see in the example, the null hypothesis was false. The doctor saying to the lady that she is not pregnant. This is a false null hypothesis, but we are accepting it. Okay, that is a mistake. A type 2 error means accepting the hypothesis which should have been rejected. Okay, we should have rejected the null hypothesis. When the doctor was saying that the lady is not pregnant, we should have rejected it. We should have done a proper blood test, urine test, and all those sonography and all those things we should have done, and on the basis of that we should say that no, this null hypothesis is wrong. But instead of doing all those tests, we are just relying on the null hypothesis. Doctor is saying it might be true only. So we should have rejected that null hypothesis, but we are failing to reject, and because of which we are committing a mistake. A type 2 error may be compared with so-called false negative. A type 2 error is committed when we fail to believe a truth. A type 2 error occurs when one rejects the alternative hypothesis. That is, fail to reject the null hypothesis when the alternative hypothesis is true. Okay, so null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis, they are both will be mutually opposite. When in that case, in our example, the null hypothesis was the lady is not pregnant, so the alternative will be the lady is pregnant, isn't it? So we should have rejected the null hypothesis and we should have accepted the alternative hypothesis, but we are doing everything opposite. The type 2 error is denoted by the Greek letter beta and related to the power of a test. Okay. Next, we'll have one more example problem. Let us say that our null hypothesis H0 is Raju thinks his building lift is in a good condition and safe to use. Which statement represents type 1 error? That is question number A. Question B is which statement represents type 2 error? And question C is which type of error has a larger consequence? Okay. So I have done an error in this question itself. Raju thinks his building lift is in a, here it should be good condition. Good condition. Okay, I'm messing everything. Okay, so the question is that Raju is a boy and he thinks that his his building lift is in a good condition. Okay, so in this we have got few options down and we need to select that which statement is type 1 error, which statement is type 2 error, and among type 1 and type 2 which error has got a larger consequence. Okay, so option number 1 is Raju thinks that his building lift is in a good condition and safe to use. In fact, it is not in a good condition and not safe to use. Option 2 is Raju thinks that his building lift is in a good condition and safe to use. In fact, it is in a good condition and safe to use. Option 3 is Raju thinks that his building lift is not in a good condition and not safe to use. In fact, it is not in a good condition and not safe to use. And last, fourth option is Raju thinks that his building lift is in a good condition and is not in a good condition and not safe to use. In fact, it is in a good condition and safe to use. See, among here, can you see the first option? We'll check out the first option first of all, that Raju thinks that his building lift is in a good condition and safe to use. In fact, it is not in a good condition. Okay, it is not in a good condition and not safe to use. Okay, so here if suppose it is the bad decision of Raju. Okay, Raju thinks that the lift is in a good condition, but in reality, it is not in a good condition. So his thinking and in reality, the thing is something different. Raju is thinking that the lift is in a good condition, and suppose he is going to use that lift, he may, there are chances that he may hurt himself. Okay, so he is doing an error. So this is an error. Okay, the thinking and in reality, the null hypothesis and the reality both are different. Next, we'll check out the option number 2. Raju thinks that the building lift is in a good condition and safe to use, and in fact, it is in a good condition and safe to use. So, this is a correct decision of Raju. Raju thinks that it is in a good condition and safe to use, and in reality also it is in a good condition and safe to use. So, if he will use the lift, he may not end up hurting himself. He may use the lift and he'll do his work. Next, check out option number 3, where Raju thinks that the lift is not in a good condition and safe to use, and in reality also the lift is not in a good condition and not safe to use. So accepting the null hypothesis was the right decision. Okay, Raju is thinking that the lift is not in a good condition and not safe to use, and in reality also the lift is not in a good condition and not safe to use. So the thinking of Raju is very much correct. He thought not to use lift and he is correct. He has saved himself. Now check out the last option, the option number 4. It states that Raju thinks that the building lift is in a good means it is not in a good condition and not safe to use, but in reality it is in a good condition and safe to use. Okay, Raju is thinking that lift is not in a good condition, but in reality it is in a good condition. So this time Raju was wrong. See, there is no harm in not using the lift when it was in a good condition, but his decision was absolutely wrong. Now, as you compare that option number 1, 2, 3, 4, we can eliminate option number 2 and 3. Okay, now looking at option number 1, would you say it is type 1 error or type 2 error? See, feel free to pause the video and think about it for a moment. Remember that type 1 error means we are rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. Okay, and type 2 error means here we are failing to reject the null hypothesis, means we are accepting the null hypothesis when it is false. Okay, so at this point we need to determine when the null hypothesis is true and when the null hypothesis is false. See, so the question itself it is given. We know that the null hypothesis is Raju thinks that his building lift is in a good condition and safe to use. This is our null hypothesis. Okay, building lift is in a good condition and safe to use. Now you check out the option number 1. It is saying that the lift is not in a good condition and not safe to use. So it is saying that the null hypothesis is false. Okay, because the null hypothesis is, as you can see in the question itself, the null hypothesis, this blue color line what I have written in the question, building lift is in a good condition and safe to use. This is null hypothesis. But what you can see in this option, this null hypothesis is wrong because it is actually not in a good condition and not safe to use. But what Raju is doing, he is accepting the null hypothesis because he is also thinking that the lift is in a good condition and safe to use. Okay, so he is accepting the false null hypothesis, or you can say he is failing to reject the false hypothesis. So what kind of error it might be? Type 1 error or type 2 error? Yes, think. This is type 2 error because here the null hypothesis is false. Type 2 error, as you can see over here, type 2 error means the null hypothesis will be false. The null hypothesis will be false, but we are failing to reject the false null hypothesis. Okay, so what is the null hypothesis? This thing. The building lift is in a good condition and safe to use. This is the null hypothesis. But in reality, what is the reality? It is not in the good condition. Okay. It is not in the good condition and not safe to use. But the Raju is not rejecting the null hypothesis. He is accepting the null hypothesis and committing a mistake. So this is known as type 2 error. Now, looking at the fourth option, you could see it agrees the null hypothesis. Okay, means here in reality the building lift is in a good condition and safe to use. Means the null hypothesis is true over here. But what Raju is thinking, it is not in a good condition and not safe to use. Means he is rejecting the null hypothesis. Okay, he is rejecting the null hypothesis, but actually the null hypothesis is true, isn't it? The null hypothesis was this one. Building lift is in a good condition and safe to use, but and in reality also it is in good condition and safe to use. So that means the null hypothesis is true, but the Raju is not thinking so. He is thinking in opposite way. Means he is rejecting the null hypothesis. That means he is committing type 1 error. Okay, he rejects the null hypothesis when it is true. So that is a simple way to distinguish between type 1 and type 2 error. Okay, now you got to know now we have solved this question A and question B. Now we are moving to part C of the question, that which type of error has a greater consequence. Would you say it's type 2 or type 1 error? Well, let us look at the option number 4 first of all. It says that the building lift is in a good condition and therefore safe to use, but Raju doesn't believe that it's safe to use the lift. So if he feels that, why to use lift? Instead of that, I could opt for a staircase, and that decision doesn't have any significant consequence because anyway he'll just come out of the building, do his work, and he'll be going to continue his life in a healthy manner. He's not going to face any kind of circumstances. Okay, he'll be safe anyways, he'll be continuing his life. But now look at option number 1, that is error type 2. If the lift is not in a good condition and not safe to use, and if Raju is going to use the lift, then there are chances that he may face some serious accidents and end up in the hospital. So that's pretty very bad. So option 1, that is type 2 error, has a greater consequence because if he makes that error, it can cost him a big time. It can cost him his life. Okay. So as you compare between type 1 and type 2 error, the type 2 error is more dangerous than type 1. Okay. So that's all about today's video regarding error type 1 and type 2. I hope you people found this video helpful. Thank you for watching.